I showered and changed into some of the new clothes Junip's people had thoughtfully provided. To my surprise, they hadn't been designed to humiliate me. I put on olive green pants that had the thickness of denim, and a black long-sleeved shirt. All in all, I almost looked like I came from Earth. I messaged the others to meet outside. Before we left the room, I excused myself to use the bathroom, in order to get a minute alone with Smelly. "Can Junip's people listen in on our conversation through our data bracelets?" I asked him. "Accessing another's bracelet data is illegal within the Confederation, and there are safeguards in place to prevent abuse of power. I suspect Junip would only risk listening through your bracelets in an emergency. Nevertheless, I will be able to monitor systems and alert you if he attempts to listen in." We met up with the others on the lawn, sitting as far as possible from any buildings or benches or other structures that might have listening devices. Everyone else had washed and changed as well, and they were all dressed more or less like I was, except for the Colonel, who wore a tan suit with military cut. I introduced Steve to Colonel Rage and Alice, and then, keeping my voice low, I told Steve what Glee-Wixix had wanted us to do. Then we recounted the mutiny on the Kind Disposition and its aftermath. He listened, but said very little as he took it all in. When I finished, he just shook his reptilian head. "I'm sorry," he said. "That's hard." "I wish I hadn't brought you back into all of this," I told him. "You didn't know it was all gonna fall apart. And now that it has, better I should be here, to keep you from mucking everything up." "I heard a great deal about you when I debriefed Zeke after his return," Colonel Rage told Steve. "I like your swagger, son, and everything about you tells me that you're a natural leader. I'm glad to have you on board." Now he turned to the rest of us. "What we need is a plan. We're among enemies and we have no way back. I think our approach needs to be twofold." "We're not among enemies," I interrupted. "Junip is an enemy, and he is powerful, and his movement for peace lackeys are a problem, but it's a mistake to think that the entire Confederation as the bad guys." "I understand how you feel," the Colonel said, "but the good side of the Confederation hasn't made an appearance yet, and the bad side seems awfully busy. I don't want to sugarcoat this because you need to hear the hard truths. These people tried to kill us, and if they don't try again, it will only be because they're going to lock us away for the crimes they themselves committed. We need an escape plan. We need to steal some transportation and go home. Given that last year you stole a ship and broke into a prison, I think this should be a piece of cake." "We are not at full strength," Charles said, shaking his head. "This alien, Tamret," Colonel Rage said to me. "Your account made her seem pretty important to your success last time. You think we can count on her to help us out?" "Are you kidding?" I said. "She lives for this sort of thing." "Then we bide our time. Haste is our enemy. We need to find a ship, and we need to make sure we know how to get home. Finally, we need to collect as much technology as possible." "For what?" I asked. "This is the new reality, son," the Colonel said. "One group of aliens almost conquered our planet. They got pushed back, but now there's only one power in the galaxy, and they're turning out to be a bunch of thugs who don't much care for backwards worlds like ours. When we return to Earth, I want to be able to do it with the means of developing ways to keep our planet safe. We got a hold of one of those flying saucers back in the 40s, but the engineers didn't know what they were doing. Now we're all walking around with instruction manuals on our wrists. We get the tech, we figure out how it works, and we bring it back home." I didn't say anything to this, but I didn't love the idea of bringing dark matter missile technology back to Earth. I also believed that the Colonel was wrong about the Confederation. Someone like Junip could rise to power temporarily, but he did it with lies and tricks. The truth would eventually come out, and the real Confederation, embodied by beings like Dr. Roop, Captain Quassel, and Glee-Wixix, would show itself. I knew that if I tried to make the case, the Colonel would see me as just a naive kid, so for once I kept my mouth shut. The best argument, I decided, was the Confederation itself. The longer we stayed, the more the Colonel would see this place, or see what this place really was. "We'll take it slow," I said, "and see what develops that we can use." "Right you are," the Colonel said. "We gather intel, skills, and tech. I plan to log as many hours in the flight sim room as they'll let me, but we have to play it smart if we're going to give ourselves enough time. That means no more outbursts, Zeke. Don't make them angry, or let them get you angry.
Act like you're not a threat, and they'll let their guard down.
Okay, I said, though I knew I wasn't terribly good at keeping a low profile.
How did you manage to talk at the news conference anyhow? Charles asked. I mean, you broke through that dampening field. Does that mean you can manipulate their systems?
Tell them you did it with the power of imagination, Smelly suggested. I don't know, I said. It must have been a glitch in the program. It just wasn't there anymore. The colonel looked at me for a moment, like he was trying to figure out if I was lying or not.
Maybe it was a sabotage, he said after a little while. Could there be people on our side after all? That would be good news.
It would show you that we don't have to fear the Confederation, I said.
Negative, the colonel said. I was just thinking that if there were criminals, and they were armed, we could commandeer their weapons.
We decided that we had no choice but to settle in Confederation detainees. The people who worked or stayed in the compound had been instructed not to speak to us, but we received plenty of nasty stares. I thought that eating at a compound cafeteria was going to be particularly unpleasant, but we weren't allowed to go anywhere else, so once everyone started getting hungry, we decided there was no choice but to put up with it. I helped the colonel and Alice through the food offerings, and then we wandered over to an empty large table, enough for all of us. We'd only just sat down when a deer-headed alien walked over and stood behind Charles. He said nothing for a long time, just kind of leaning forward and back. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice was telling me to ignore him and he'd go away. In the front of my mind was another voice telling me that I knew it wasn't true. Right at the center was Smelly saying, "That guy is starting to bug me."
Can I help you, mate?
Steve finally asked. Yeah, he said, turning towards us. I now saw the black Movement for Peace armband. Maybe you should take your trays and eat outside, so you don't stink up the place.
Son, we're not bothering anyone, Colonel Rage said. I get that you joined this organization because it made you feel good about yourself. That's what small-minded people like you do. If they can't take pride in their achievements or their abilities, they become racist so they can take pride in not being the other guy. Well, congratulations, you're not us. I'm sure your friends over there.
He gestured towards a table of a half-dozen aliens of various species, all of them wearing armbands and all of them looking at us.
Dared you to come over and intimidate us. You did your best. You had the courage to lurk menacingly. Now why don't you head back and feel great about yourself for what you had the guts to do here today?
That's exactly what I would have expected from you primitives, the deer guy said. My polite conversation is met with mockery and scorn.
You complained about our odor, Charles said. I do not see how that is being polite.
I'm done being gentle, the deer alien said. It's time for you to go. Steve stood up and was about to say something that probably would have been cool and menacing, but Alice cut him off.
I know, I would like to learn how to be less primitive,
she said, offering the deer guy her sweetest smile. She brushed some of her hair out of her eyes.
Is it an advanced trait to be polite to strangers?
That you'd even have to ask shows how savage you truly are, the deer alien told her.
I'm really trying to understand,
she said, as though she were struggling to puzzle it out.
So if others who are less advanced than even I am were to visit my home, what would be the right way to treat them?
He stood there, kind of like a deer alien in the headlights. He either had to contradict what he just had said, or admit that his behavior had been rude. Finally, rather than saying anything, he slinked back to his table. Steve sat back down, and Alice turned away from the colonel, a radiant smile on her face.
Not bad,
Mi-sun said, sighing with relief.
Way to diffuse.
Alice shrugged and went back to her food.
I figured if I didn't do something, one of these hotheads was going to pick a fight, and then we'd all get in trouble. I was just trying to make Bambi uncomfortable.
That's the kind of thinking we need, the colonel said. We need to come at problems from new angles. Our goal isn't to get our pictures in the yearbooks, kid. We're trying to stay alive, stay out of prison, and get back home, so anything that works is fair game in my book.
And with that, he returned to his lunch. I found that I was no longer very hungry. I kept an eye on the news outputs, which were pretty varied. There were plenty of voices, including regular postings by Halou, that defended me and suggested Junip's government was covering up for its own involvement in the destruction of the kind disposition. Unfortunately, most beings in the Confederation had a hard time understanding the concept of criminal deception, and it was easier for them to believe that a primitive off-worlder was to blame than it was to suspect their own political leadership. It didn't help matters that Junip's movement for peace seemed to be growing in popularity. People involved with it were arguing that I needed to be tried for the destruction of the kind disposition. Seeing those words made me want to curl up into a ball. I didn't think I could take another rigged trial. The evening of our second day, I finally got some good news. Tamrat had arrived on the station, and was being processed. They expected her at the compound within a couple of hours. I was too excited to eat anything. I sat nervously with the others while they finished, and then told them I would wait for her outside.
"We'll keep you company, mate,"
Steve said. The colonel announced that he had booked some time in the flight sim, so he excused himself, but everyone else began to take seats on the benches that offered a good view of the transport shuttle landing pad. I found myself standing next to Alice and feeling kind of uneasy. "Listen," I said, "maybe it's best if you aren't around for this?"
Oh, come on,
Alice said.
I'm not going to be locked up like I'm some dirty secret. I haven't done anything wrong.
"You stowed away on a spaceship," I said, "which is kind of wrong."
Whatever,
Alice countered.
I'm here now. Besides, from what I've heard about Temrat, she'll probably respect me for that. Do you really think that me just standing around is going to make your girlfriend flip out?
"You have to understand that Tamrat can be kind of
intense,"
Alice interrupted.
Yeah, I think you might have mentioned that. The thing is, I don't know Temrat, and I don't know much about Rarls, but I know about girls. I'm going to tell you right now, if you try and keep me out of her way, she's really going to start to wonder why. Oh, and here's another tip. You and Temrat are going to get along a lot better if you stop acting like she's a bomb about to go off. Maybe show her a little respect, and you won't have to be so afraid of her intensity.
It was true that Alice didn't know the first thing about Temrat, but I was still a little stung by her rebuke. Was I being too cautious about Tamrat's feelings? If so, maybe it had nothing to do with Tamrat's jealousy. Maybe it had to do with my own feelings of guilt for leaving her alone for so long, and then showing up with another girl by my side. It wasn't that I liked Alice or anything, I assured myself, but she was smart and pretty and brave and resourceful. Most guys would kind of like her, wouldn't they? I sighed. You're probably right. Besides, whether you are supposed to be here or not, you're part of our team of unwanted outsiders. Alice cocked her head.
You mean that?
Why wouldn't I mean it? It's not like being a despised interloper is such a great thing.
But you guys are pretty amazing despised interlopers. You have all of these experience together. I'm just the fifth wheel, and sometimes I feel like you guys don't trust me.
Believe me, we trust you plenty, I said. And we're racking up enough new experiences. More than I'd like, to be honest. You're one of us. She grinned.
Thanks. Now you can get on with the business of your reunion?
I hoped it would be that easy. I had no idea what Tamrat had been through since the last time I'd seen her. I told myself that whatever had happened, whatever was going on, we would make it right. Whatever physical harm had been done could be fixed by Confederation medicine, and any emotional harm could be mended with time and attention.
"We all suffered a great injustice,"
Charles said to me as I watched the shuttle grow closer.
"None of us more than Tamrat, but we all paid the price for doing what was right."
She may not see it that way. Maybe she feels like she's being punished because I wanted to rescue my dad.
"Zeke, I do not wish to overstate our importance, but we saved the galaxy. In the short time that we were on the Confederation, we saw the Fads kill and hurt and capture innocent beings. We saw them do incredible damage, and we gave the Confederation the power to put a stop to that. You can only take responsibility for what you do, not how others choose to react to it."
I knew he was right. I just hoped Tamrat did too. I watched as the shuttle docked, and then had a long wait on the walk as the walkway equalized its air pressure and the doors were made safe to open. I could hear my heart beat in my ears. A million possibilities passed through my head. Tamret leaping towards me, embracing me in an uncompromising hug. Tamret limping, walking with a cane, wearing an eye patch like Colonel Rage. Tamret angry and cold, accusing me of abandoning her. Or Tamret broken and withdrawn, but trying to pretend that she was the same girl I remembered. I told myself these things never play out the way that I think they will. I could work something over and over in my head, trying to imagine how it will be, and then it always goes some direction I didn't anticipate. It was time to stop inventing scenarios. The time had come to see the reality. Finally, the door hissed open, and I felt myself walking forward, unable to control myself. I didn't care what she looked like, how badly injured she might be. I would be the one leaping forward with the uncompromising hug. Then, there were 2 silhouetted shapes emerging from the transport. 2 Rarls. They stepped out of the shadows, and I saw the first was Tamret, her fur almost blinding white. She wore a white skirt that went down to her ankles and a long-sleeved shirt, the same lavender color as her eyes. Her dark hair was cut a little shorter than I remembered and pulled back. Her eyes were wide and sparkling, and her lips curled into a grin of happiness. There she was, looking happy and healthy. She didn't look like she'd endured torture or mistreatment of any sort. She was positively beaming, her pretty face full of life, and if I wasn't telling myself stories, full of mischief. She was also standing kind of close to the Rarl boy who had come out with her. He was maybe 6 inches taller than she was, with tan fur and brown hair. He was broad-shouldered and muscular and handsome in the way of Rarl boys I wanted to see fall into a latrine pit. I felt myself standing rigid and still. I couldn't move. I could hardly breathe. No one was moving.
"Hi, everyone,"
Tamret said. Charles broke the spell. He stepped forward.
Tamret, it is good to see you again.
"Thanks,"
she said with a huge grin.
"I want you all to meet Vilanik. He's my fiancé.